ladies, and welcome back to the Sweet Tea series. I'm your host, Taylor Dawson-Bushell. This week, you'll notice the background's looking a little bit different. That's because I am in Washington, D.C. I am joined by Alexandria Paolozzi. She is the Director of Government Affairs at CUFI, which stands for Christians United for Israel. Today, we're going to be talking about Israel, and we're going to go through kind of the basics of how Israel got to where they were today. We'll talk about what the conflict is with the Palestinians and try to give just a whole general overview of the conflict that's happening right now. Alexandria, how are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Taylor.
Thanks for coming on the set. You are very well regarded when it comes to Israel policy.
Well, Christians United for Israel is an organization that has 10 million members. So I have the honor and privilege of being here in DC as their representative, ambassador, if you will. And we've got our headquarters in San Antonio, Texas.
Woo, Texas!
So very close to your regular stomping grounds. But up here in DC, we thought that it was very critical to have a DC office where we could have folks go and have face-to-face conversations with elected officials. So that's what I do.
Amazing. So we are friends, like we can put that on the record. we know each other. So it was kind of fun when I was out and about today because I haven't been back in DC in a while. I actually stopped by our cute little coffee shop, Call Your Mother, which is the Jewish deli out here. And I thought it was so funny. I was getting my bagel and I realized oh my gosh, it's like a Jewish bakery. And we're talking about Israel today. And it just reminded me how many little places in DC are Jewish, run and owned.
Yes. You and I have had coffee at Tate.
Yes.
Out of Boston. But yes, there's a big Jewish population in the United States. And many of which I think we can see very clearly since everything that has ignited the Middle East since October 7th. And I know we'll get to that. But anti-Semitism is running rampant. And I think the more that we can emphasize our Judeo-Christian faith and foundation, the more that we'll be able to just help and stand shoulder to shoulder with Christians and Jews here in America.
Yeah, actually, speaking of anti-Semitism, I was on my honeymoon, and I remember you texting me. I was in Spain. Yeah. I was in the southern part of Spain, and it was kind of crazy to me how Middle Eastern it felt down there. You know, I was expecting it to be kind of like what you see on Pinterest, like Barcelona and cultural and dancing. And it actually felt like I was in Morocco. It was kind of wild how just how Muslim it felt really. And then I looked on the map and I see how close it was wow, much closer than I thought in my head. So it kind of made sense. But I was also there and I remember getting a text from you and you're like, hey, there's a warning in Paris. You knew I was traveling there after that. You were like, there are protests going everywhere. I think you said the Louvre got evacuated at one point.
It could have. I don't recall. There was a lot going on at that time.
And it was global. It was a global reaction. But I remember you texting me and I was sitting out trying sangria for the first time. And I look up and you're right, there was this huge protest happening in front of me with all the Palestinians. I mean, it was wild to me to see the global reaction of everything. Did you see a lot of that here in DC?
Yes. So what we're referring to is the attack on October 7th, where Hamas, which is a U.S. recognized terror proxy of Iran, that is located in the southern part of Israel in the Gaza Strip, came over, infiltrated, and carried out a massacre amongst the Israeli population in the south. It is the largest attack on Jews since the Holocaust. And what made it so catastrophic was this was not a military to military escalation. This was rogue terrorists coming across a border and killing innocent men, women, children, and babies in the streets, in their homes, in cold blood. I woke up when Israel starts its day. We're sleeping and wake up at different times. So I had my phone next to me and I was woken up from my phone going off, I had 50 missed text messages, and it was our team saying, it's happening. There's an attack. We've got to be on top of this. We have to see what's transpiring. Like, it's bad. Immediately, I pulled up my phone, went on X, and just started following along. And the Hamas terrorists were actually recording with GoPros the atrocities that they were carrying out. And it's unspeakable. And to see the global reaction from that moment since has been shocking. And I think every person in America needs to be mindful of what this means. We are disconnected, but we're also connected through so much.
Yeah.
Whether that be our faith, whether that be geopolitical alliances, or even just security concerns. So there's a lot that has been put on the front burner for Americans since 10/7, and just Americans traveling in general was a great example, because that happened, and I think it maybe was like a week after is when I text you.
Yeah.
And there was the pro-Hamas riots of people in the streets across Europe and here in America, where people are supportive of Hamas, saying that they praise the attack that happened, where babies were beheaded, women were brutally gang raped and then beheaded, killed. The torture that they endured was just horrific. And so it's the likes of which we have not seen.
Yeah. And I feel like, the media, they weren't like, they didn't feel super biased one way or another, but them just simply documenting protest after protest after protest, I felt like made America wake up and kind of look and be like, wait, what? Hamas is like, we know Hamas is a terrorist group. Like, I don't think anyone, like, as Americans, we know, like, that's associated with terrorism. Like, why would you ever support that? It was kind of wild to see the country or the world react the way that it did.
It was, but we're not ignorant to it. In America and on college campuses, I'm sure your listeners are aware of maybe what's happening in Columbia University right now. There are people who are supportive of Hamas entrenched in our universities. They're professors, they're students, and they're out there tormenting Jewish students violently in verbal accusations and physical accusations. So much so that the president of the US and Israel made statements this past Sunday saying, essentially, students of Columbia, leave the Jewish students alone. We're coming into Passover, which is a big Jewish holiday. And I think it's a good depiction of what is taking place right now globally, especially in America. We've got to be aware and mindful of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you paint, and I know this is a very loaded question, and it's going to be hard to shorten it, but can you just paint a picture of why there is tension between Israel and Palestine? And we hear a lot of words like the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights. Like, can you just give us a general overview so that we can understand the complexities of it?
Sure. First, I want to tell all of your listeners at the top of the show, there's too much information to give you a deep dive on everything. So I highly encourage everyone, if you go to CUF as in Frank, I.org, we have so many materials and tools just to help your listeners. I think we're coming from a biblical mandate of supporting the Jewish people and the Jewish state. We know from Genesis to Revelation, it calls for Christians to support Israel and the Jewish people. There is no disconnection. That covenant that God made with Abraham transcends generations, and it is not broken. And so as Christians, we need to recognize and remember where our heritage and faith comes from. That's Jesus, right? And Jesus was a Jew. He lived on this earth as a Jewish man. He died as a Jewish man. And the patriarchs of Christianity were Jewish. And right now we're seeing society and extremists from both sides, whether it be politically, even within faiths, try and say that there needs to be a break between that relationship. And CUFA exists to say no. We're going to stand shoulder to shoulder. We're going to carry out our biblical mandate of support for Israel. And with that, we have to have an understanding and a knowledge of why that is. And so as Christians, it's reliant on ourselves to seek out the knowledge and information.
Completely
We
agree.
have to have the ability to respond to the misinformation that we're seeing, especially on social media. There's been, mentions of TikTok. The problem there is that anti-Semitism within TikTok and the misinformation is rampant. People are watching these short videos and taking everything that is being said at whoever is making the video's word. If you look into the person and you look into their background, most of the time they are biased. And so a short snippet of what we're dealing with right now that I hope is helpful to your listeners, but I also hope it encourages them to, again, go on our website. We've got facts, we've got information, we've got books that they can just have at their fingertips, and it's all right there.
Perfect.
So after World War I, there was the breakup of the Ottoman Empire. And this is the history of what is now modern day Middle East. The British took control over most of the Middle East. And at that time, you had both Arabs and Jews living in what now is Israel. There was an Arab rebellion against the British and the Jewish neighbors that were there. And it caused the British officers and government to say, we need to figure out a solution to what's happening with these two people groups, the Arab community here and the Jewish community here. How do we do that? So they established what's called the Peel Commission. And the Peel Commission said and concluded after their fact-finding that there needed to be two states for two people, a state for the Jewish population and a state for the Arab population. We now know that since then, Israel and the international community has worked together and offered what that Arab community and people group are now referred to as Palestinians, 5 different options to have a state of their own, and they have rejected it every time. They were offered 80% of the land. Israel was given 20%. Israel was fine with it. They were going to take with whatever they could get at the moment, and every time were met with violence. And so where that has brought us to now is after the modern establishment of Israel in 1948, the Arab countries surrounding Israel banded together and attacked. And Israel, by the grace of God, survived, and they were able to hold their own. And since then, what we have seen is different types of conflicts, but you've also seen the Arab nations surrounding Israel come to grips with the reality on the ground. And so Egypt, Jordan, they have normalized relations with Israel and have different types of agreements, whether it be for an economic benefit or water usage. And again, this is very short and not a full depiction of what's happening, but this is how we have come to where we are today.
Yeah. And so what is the difference between like the Gaza Strip, Golan Heights, and Palestine? Because I think those are terms and regions that keep getting brought up.
Sure. So there's no firm Palestine, and that is because when offered, they have rejected any opportunity to have a state of their own. In 2005, Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip and gave that area to the Palestinian people and whoever they wanted to be their leaders at the time. As soon as Israel left and forcibly took their citizens out of that area in 2005, the Palestinians there had the opportunity to have their own state. Essentially today, they do. If you want to look for what a Palestine looks like, it's Gaza.
Okay.
And what they decided was to elect a extreme group, Hamas, to rule them. And from there, instead of establishing a flourishing society that was going to give them what they needed to show the international community, this is what we can do. They've destroyed everything that was left, whether it be greenhouses, factories, water supplies, And the international community has aided and abetted this poverty state. And that is where Hamas really expelled what we call the Palestinian Authority, another ruling faction within the Palestinian society. That's another issue.
Yeah.
The Palestinian groups are within the Gaza, which is in the south, and then you've got the West Bank, and there's different zones in the West Bank. And the Palestinian Authority was expelled from Gaza and now resides in the Palestinian Authority. In the West Bank.
Perfect. So thanks to Kufi, I was able to go to Israel and I was able to experience the culture. But the cool thing, as you know, because you work there, is that they took us to Palestine. And so I got to get out and I got to walk around the region. And I remember being taken aback about like just how great it was. Like there was no life. It was like all concrete. There was trash on the ground, rubble. Do they choose to live that way or are they forced to live that way?
So we were in the West Bank.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I know it's actually something that is very common. A lot of people referred to the West Bank or Gaza as Palestine. Again, that's by choice, that it's not. And it's something that the international community has been entwined in trying to figure out since the modern day establishment of Israel in 1948. We were in the West Bank and we were in one of the largest refugee camps in that area.
Okay, so that was a refugee camp within within the West Bank.
Within the West Bank, correct. Within the West Bank that is close to Bethlehem. And so that area is patrolled and controlled by the Palestinian Authority.
Which is Hamas?
No, Hamas is another faction within the Palestinian overview. They're the more extreme side of the parties. And they're in Gaza. They kicked out the Palestinian Authority, the Fatah party. And so you've got two different people representing what is supposed to be one group of people, the Palestinians.
I mean, if this doesn't show like how complex everything is, like, I don't know what will. So you were here in DC during the Abraham Accords.
Yes.
Can you kind of tell us, one, what that is, and then two, what your experience was within the process?
Sure. So it was established under the Trump administration. And Pastor Hagee, who is the founder and chairman of Christians United for Israel, came to DC and had very close communications with the American diplomats that were instrumental in bringing forth the Abraham Accords. What this was an opportunity for other Arab countries to establish and normalize relations with Israel. And so, like I said, you had Egypt and Jordan that have, they're the two big Arab countries that have diplomatic relations with Israel. The Abraham Accords brought in the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Sudan, and they essentially said these Arab countries now are also going to normalize relations with Israel. It was a huge accomplishment.
Yeah.
And part of, people have speculated, and it's very, I think, going down the right road, but the catalyst for why Hamas carried out the atrocities on 10/7 was because they wanted to upend any opportunity that Israel had to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. They were going to be the next country that was going to come in under that Abraham Accords model and normalize relations with Israel. And the arm behind these proxy groups around Israel, Hamas being one of them, is Iran. And so Iran does not like seeing these other Arab countries normalize relations with Israel because of all of the benefits that they're going to receive by doing that, whether it be
that Israel's going to receive from all of these other countries?
The other countries. So Israel gives a lot back for such a small country, whether it be through technology or, like I said, their agricultural technologies and infrastructure are huge in the Middle East, where water is very sparse.
That's so interesting. It feels so biblical. It's like, Israel will thrive. They will succeed. The Jewish people will thrive. They will succeed. And it's interesting that you're painting a picture of them giving back to their enemies, right?
Oh, yes. Yes, they do. And even for the United States, there's a lot of different agreements that we have with Israel for security and defense.
I was going to say their national security stuff. I mean, when I went over there, like getting to hear all the different things they do was pretty incredible. I was like, I had no idea that Israel had such great technology when it came to like military and safety.
Yeah, it even does medically. And so I think like what they give back to the world, that is not talked about enough, but it is so influential. And these Arab countries realize how much they would benefit and how much their people would benefit if they normalized relations with Israel.
So why is it that Iran has a problem and all these other countries like Saudi Arabia don't seem to have a problem? Well, after the Abraham Accords, they don't have a problem.
So it's deep-rooted. You've got the Sunni and Shiite pull. What we know right now is Israel is a very small country surrounded by these Arab countries. Again, when they said that they were an independent nation in 1948, the Arab countries essentially banded together and attacked Israel, trying to wipe them off the map. They did not succeed. And now, today, you've got these Arab countries recognizing the reality on the ground, which is it's better for them to normalize relations with Israel and move past this idea of controlling the entire Middle East. And they're getting on board. Iran is the one country that is pushing back. They call Israel the little Satan, and they call the United States big Satan.
Wow.
So if Americans think for one moment that what is happening in the Middle East right now does not affect us, that should cause very high concerns to you. Again, since 10/7, we have seen you have Iranian proxy to the north of Israel on the border and in Lebanon. It's called Hezbollah. They're one of the strongest proxies of Iran, and they have been launching rockets and missiles into Israel since 10/8. There's speculation that there was supposed to be a larger attack where Hamas infiltrated from the south and Hezbollah was going to come in from the north. Thank God that did not happen. But we still see Israel being attacked on every front right now. And the actor behind it all is Iran.
So when I keep going back to my time at Israel, because it was
it's so influential and important, I think, as a Christian to experience that. So,
and again, going back to like Kufi taking us there and sponsoring us, it was amazing because we got to see not just the religious side, but the geopolitical side, and then all the different regions. And it was cool because they didn't just make us talk to people who thought and acted like us. Like we got to talk to all different people groups. Like we talked to a Palestinian refugee. Like we talked to a Jew living in Bethlehem versus a Jew living in modern day Israel. Like, and all the different perspectives, and it brought so much color and life to the situation. But bringing it back to the U.S., something I still don't totally understand why it's such a big deal. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem. That was a place I remember getting to see it. I got to take a picture from the plaque.
yeah.
It was crazy how many like pro-Trump signs were in that region too. I remember driving and being like, wow, we're like not in the US right now. And yet there's so much like pro-Trump stuff going on. Like it resonated with the people there. Can you explain and break down why that is?
Sure. Again, from a biblical perspective, the capital of Israel is Jerusalem. You cannot separate the Jewish heritage from Jerusalem. The international community has walked on eggshells for years, trying not to upset the Arab population, and with the hopes of being the person, whether it be a president or a political figure, bringing about this peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And so because of that, no one really wanted to rock the boat. So most countries put their embassies in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is beautiful. It's right on the water. It's gorgeous. But it's not their capital. Every other country, if you go to our embassy in Paris, France, it's in Paris, right? It's in the capital of the country. That's just how it works, except for Israel. Israel is always the outlier in these diplomatic games. And it's okay as long as it's just done in Israel. So the big emphasis for moving the embassy was Congress actually passed a law in 1995 that said that the U.S. was going to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Wow.
There was a waiver within that bill that allowed the president to say, because of security concerns, we're not going to do this. And every president since that bill passed waived the option of moving the embassy except for President Trump. And Pastor Hagee actually had a face-to-face dinner meeting with him when he came into office, and he looked at Trump and he said, Mr. President, if you want to do one thing that's going to solidify you in the history books, it's moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And he did.
That is incredible. So you said 95?
1995.
Wow, that's almost 30 years
Yeah.
of that being an option. And so why did they pick Tel Aviv? So is everyone else, like most other countries, are they still in Tel Aviv? Has anyone else that you know of?
There's been
there?
multiple countries that followed suit and have moved their embassy. Even today, for me, I don't recall which country it was, but said that they'll be moving theirs too. I think what Trump showed was you cannot be afraid to change the narrative. The reality on the ground is different than what the international community is trying to project. They're trying to project status quo, keep things how they are. It's peaceful right now. There's no conflict. Well, I think what we have learned was 10-7 changed the narrative. 4-13 changed the game. And so what I mean by 4-13 for your members listening is Iran decided, and this is unprecedented, to carry out an attack from Iranian soil and launch missiles towards Israel, hundreds of them. It's the first time they have done that. And normally they carry out attacks through their proxies, whether it be Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis. And now they're doing it in a very bold fashion. And so
I see. So the country itself is now just coming right out and saying, hey, it's us. We're doing this. We're not. Like they're
not hiding behind anyone.
I see. Because they're the ones funding Hamas.
Yes, Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. And the United States recognizes their Iranian Guard Corps, the IRGC, as a terrorist entity as well. And so again, there's a lot with that. But I was saying 4-13, hundreds of rockets are coming into Israel. And here you have 10-7, the narrative changes from supporting Israel in their time of need because of this like horrific attack that happened. The international community essentially now turning, there being these pro-Hamas rallies all over the world. 4-13 happens, and all of the Arab countries that couldn't directly come out and still say, we support you, we want to have relations with you, it was more behind the scenes, banded together and all defended Israeli airspace. 99% of the projectiles from Iran did not hit Israel. And that is huge. And so it was the United States, it was the UK, it was the UAE, it was Jordan, it was Egypt, all banding together to stop these rockets going into Israel. That's huge. And if that is not a clear indication to Iran that it's a step too far and we're not going to let you rule this region, I don't know what is. That was a huge tipping point. And from that too, Congress for 200 days did not pass emergency aid to Israel. Israel defending their airspace, it cost them $1.4 billion. One night. One night of protecting their citizens is $1.4 billion.
Why? Why is it so expensive?
Because of the the defensive mechanisms that they have through Iron Dome, David Sling. All of that is very expensive. They're going to use it to protect their people. But it's costly. And so Congress had emergency aid to Israel held up for 200 days. Finally, after 4-13, the CUFI had a emergency fly-in. We had our people come in, and later that week, the House passed the emergency supplemental bill. The Senate just passed it last night, and the president signed it this morning. So after 200 days, after 200 days of waiting, of defending themselves, of being in it alone, of depleting their resources, Israel finally feels a little bit of support from their closest ally.
So what are some of the like attacks, sorry, I'm using the word attacks towards Israel, not like physical attacks, but in the US, like if people are critiquing Israel right now, what are some of those critiques that our audience may be hearing in the news? And then what would be your counterpoint to any of those?
Sure. So I think the most familiar one that you'll see and most of your followers will see online is that Israel are colonialists, that they are creating genocide against the Palestinians in that area, which is just flat wrong. So the Jewish people are indigenous to the land of Israel. Again, as Christians, we need to do our homework. We need to know these things. That is biblical. And the word for the Arab population in that region was not even used or termed as Palestinians until later, until the 1900s. So you have indigenous people who are Jewish living there, and also biblical. We understand where the lines diverge.
Right.
And again, I think it's just so imperative that people do their homework. But again, kufi.org, we have all of this and fact sheets to help everyone. Very digestible. And it's super helpful right now. So if you see anything online and you're reading these and you're wondering, red flag, this does not seem accurate, please feel free to go to our website because we really have a lot of resources there.
That's awesome. So do you think, I mean, super loaded question, but like peace in the Middle East, it's like a term, especially in DC, you hear all the time, peace in the Middle East, peace in the Middle East. What, in your opinion, does like diplomacy look like over there? Like, is it peace through strength? Is it, you know, quiet conversations? What is that, in your opinion, what would that look like over there?
So I think, again, the narrative and the game has shifted. And we see the juxtaposition between the Trump administration, their maximum pressure campaign against Iran, pulling out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2015, which was an Iran nuclear deal that the Obama administration implemented. The Biden administration came, re-implemented those policies, and now we see Iran more bolder than ever. And so I think if you're looking for the diplomatic differences, never before in history has there been such a stark difference in Middle East policy than Obama, Trump, Biden. And you can see that most clearly with, again, Iran.
So there's, you know, a lot of hate right now. And I feel like in America, I mean, we definitely feel it. It's like we're always fighting with each other. And we feel that tension. Is that tension similar to what's happening over there with Arabs versus Jews? Or is it something deeper and more complex?
It's more deeply rooted there because that's their heritage. And I think, too, you can never get a step away from it. We have seen through generations the violence and attacks against Jewish people. And as Christians, and as someone who has also been to Israel, the depiction that I love is going to the Holocaust Museum in Israel, Yad Vashem, and there is a section for the righteous among the nations. And I think that is a reminder that we need right now as Americans, as Christians that need to support our Jewish brothers and sisters, our cousins, if you will. We're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with them and not allow them to get the brunt of what is happening. And we need to stand up and stand in the gap and say, you're not alone. And so CUFI, right after 10/7, decided on a campaign, Israel, you are not alone. And under it, they took out billboards all across the United States. And in Times Square, there's a big billboard too, of just saying, Israel, you are not alone. We're here. And we hope that it's encouraging and uplifting as these attacks are had here in the United States against the Jewish community. Another thing, and I have it for you.
Ooh,
we have these friendship bracelets kind of off of like T Swift, but it says Israel lives. And so I want you to have it.
Oh my gosh, how cute is this? Thank you.
You can also get these on our websites. So please feel free, or if your members just want to ping you, and if they're interested, we can find a way to make sure that they can get them.
Oh,
get
how
access.
cool. And
Yeah.
so does this go towards Kufi, like fundraising and all of that?
Every fundraising effort that Kufi has had since 10/7 has actually gone directly to Israel. So there's first responders in Israel. The atrocities on 10/7, there were 1,300 Israelis killed that day. There was 3,600 Israelis wounded. The first responders were so important at that time. And so we want to make sure that Israel, again, you're not alone, you're supported. And Kufi has just been leading the effort in that. And so proceeds go there.
That's amazing. This is so cute. I mean, ladies, you can't see it, but like it is like multicolored blue with a little gold. I love my gold accents.
Me too.
And you're wearing all blue. So I felt like this is just like the perfect color. Also, blue symbolizes peace, right?
Maybe.
I think so.
I don't want to say that for sure.
I know, you're like
but blue's my favorite color, so sure.
Yes, it matches your eyes.
Yeah.
So in the next coming days, what should our audience be like keeping an eye out for as far as like the news goes? Like, is there anything like that you can tell us that might be pending that we should be aware of? Obviously, as Christians, like we know we should be praying, but like what can we look out for?
Yeah, I think right now we're at a moment in time that is historic. We're going to look back, and this is a Churchill moment. Congress just had theirs. Christians have theirs as well. So we could either be a Chamberlain or we can be a Churchill. I want to be a Churchill. And so we've got to look for those moments where just in our community, we can stand up. If you see something happen in your community against a Jewish, if your Jewish neighbors, stand up, do something, say something.
Yeah.
Love is not what you say, it's what you do. And I think from the halls of Congress down to your house and your neighbor's house, we need to be carrying that out as Christians. It's our mandate to do that. And so as we look at the Middle East and as we see things progressing, there's this axis of evil, of this authoritarianism that's growing. It's Iran, it's Russia, it's China. The three of them are working to really upend global conflict as we know it. We see it in Ukraine. Israel has their eyes on, China has their eyes on Taiwan, and then everything taking place with Iran and Israel. And so we need to be mindful of what's happening. And again, please sign up for like Kufi's weekly emails, because you will be so well informed. The Action Fund has one specifically related to policy, dives a little bit more deep. And so you can find that at kufiactionfund.org. I know I'm like throwing a lot out there, but I don't know if you've got show notes. You can pop them in the show notes.
Yes.
I've always wanted to say that.
You were literally like giving all my closing thoughts. I'm like, so what are your recommendations for education? And then where can we link? But you're just
we also have we just have so much, and I want people to know you don't have to look that hard. We do it for you, so you don't have to be scouring the internet. There is a book called The Israel Course right on Kufi's website. It goes through why Christians should support Israel, the biblical mandate to support Israel, but then the entire history of the little bit that I was able to talk about throughout this book. And you can do it with a small group or just a group of friends.
That's really cool. I like that idea of like getting a group of people together to like talk through these ideas. Because, you know, it's so fun having you on because like you are DC girl, like you got your talking points. You're like, you read the notes, like you were nailing like the closing as we wrap this up. But it's also, I like that you said that because I feel like people outside of DC don't always get together and talk about politics. In fact, I would say it's very scary to do that. I mean, I come from the DC world, and so I'm kind of like, I can talk about it, I don't have to talk about it, whatever anyone wants. But what I find is that there's a lot of conservatives and a lot of Christian conservatives that are out there, and they're kind of just like, they're truly the silent majority. They're like, oh, I actually don't tell anyone, but like I am. And it's just like, man, that really is a shame that one, you don't tell people because you're afraid of being so like judged and alienated from your friend groups. But two, it's like you don't have a place to converse and get ideas out there. And so I really like the idea of maybe getting a group of people that you trust, doing this little study and opening the conversation. Like just getting that dialogue going can lead to so much fruit.
It can. And we understand too, as Christians, like so much happens at the dinner table. And the more that America has strong families that bring in these elements, the more of a difference that we can make. So it starts there. Like, don't feel like you need to be out there with friends that you might not feel comfortable with. Start it at home with your kids and your husband, or your mom and your dad. Do it there first. I know my boss's daughter was in town last week, and she was talking about how they run these questions at the dinner table, and she's like, here we go again. But I love it. And we did not do that as a family. And so I was like, I'm jealous. I want to do that when I have a family.
Totally.
Because it really does, it keeps you sharp. Your kids aren't going to fall prey to the misinformation that's out there. If they see something on social media, they're going to have a red flag and hopefully ask you about it.
That's true. Like, that creates a safe dialogue for like child and parent to be like, Mom, I saw this. Like, I thought you said something opposite. Why are they saying this?
Yeah.
And then I think that's great for kids too, because, you know, there's with TikTok officially like being banned. I'm pretty sure I just saw that come out.
So the bill gives a year for the company to sell TikTok to someone in the United States, companies that are working with the administration to try and buy it because it's very expensive.
Okay.
But then you have the Chinese government very likely not wanting to sell the algorithm that goes with that. That's a whole nother topic. But so for right now, it's around, and we're still going to need to deal with the misinformation on there.
Yeah. And so having kids, like, for whatever that algorithm is, like, people get sucked into it.
They do.
And it's like the
It's
amount,
addictive.
yeah. And I don't know why it's more addictive than like Instagram versus like, I mean, Facebook, but like Twitter. Like, that is by far one of the most addicting apps. And it's crazy that it almost seems like the misinformation is prolific.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like that trends better than the truth. And so, yeah, going back to like having this conversation with your kids. And I feel like, I wonder if you'd agree with this, like, it doesn't matter how young your kids are. It's not like they have to be like adult children. I feel like even talking to like your young children, like, hey, like, we support Israel. Let's open up this dialogue is still good.
It is. I visited my family last weekend for my birthday, and I have a little cousin who is 2, and she had a book that she wanted me to read her about the 10 Commandments. So she came over and she sat on my lap, shows me the book, and I'm reading it to her. And every time it said the Israelis, I said, and the Israelis are, and she looked at me and I said, Jewish. Who are the people in the Bible? They're Jewish. And so we like substituted it. And so then the next morning at breakfast, we were sitting there and someone said something about Israel. And I said, Margot, who lives in Israel? She's like, the Jews. So it's just making those little connections. That's
really
so
cool.
helpful.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Well, any more closing thoughts for the audience? I mean, you gave great recommendations. You gave book recommendations. You gave resource recommendations. Any other thoughts that you'd like our audience to know?
Sure. I think right now, as conservative women, like, we can lead this charge in making sure that we're not consuming things that are detrimental to our minds and our relationship with Christ and with each other. And so I think it's up to us to like lead the charge. And I'm sure the people that watch your podcast can do just that, whether it be sharing things that are truthful and honest, being careful about what you are engaged in on social media, but then also just taking that faith and putting it into action. That means getting involved with your members of Congress. You know, they just voted on this historic package for Israel, and we're so thrilled by that. But there's going to be more coming. Don't lose sight. There might be one thing that happens that sets all of this policy and like current events on the front burner, right?
Yeah.
But I've been living with this for years. There's things that we've been working on since I joined CUFI in 2018 that are now relevant. And so I would just encourage your listeners and the people that watch your podcast just to stay informed, stay connected, and you'll make a difference.
I love that. Well, ladies, thank you for joining on this latest episode of Sweet Tea. Alexandria, thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
We will definitely drop all of those notes and all of those links in the show notes, because that, I feel like, is information that is incredibly valuable to your audience. All right, ladies, enjoy the weekend.